So we say, I don't have time to rest because I have kids. That is the reason to rest. Show them what it looks like to live a life that is not burned out.
The information in this video is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Please make informed decisions and take responsibility for your own health choices.
Welcome back to New View, New Life, where we explore empowering new perspectives that can lead to better health, deeper clarity, and a more aligned life. I'm Sherilyn, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. Dr. Saundra is a board-certified internal medicine physician, best-selling author, and internationally recognized expert on rest, resilience, and well-being. She is the creator of the 7 Types of Rest framework and has helped organizations and audiences worldwide better understand burnout, productivity, and sustainable success. Through her unique blend of medical expertise, research, and practical wisdom, Dr. Saundra equips people with tools to thrive both personally and professionally. Dr. Saundra, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here with you.
Well, you're the author of the book Sacred Rest, which I've been enjoying the audiobook as well. It's so mind-blowing, and it's changed so many people's lives across the world by this point. When was it published?
It was originally published in 2017, December of 2017.
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me in this book is the idea that rest is much more than just sleep, which was mind-blowing to me because everybody thinks, even me, till I heard your book, that if I'm tired all the time, I'm just not getting enough sleep, which obviously it is the case sometimes, but lack of sleep has very specific symptoms. And I wanted to ask you, what first led you to realize that people could be exhausted in ways that sleep alone wasn't fixing?
Yes, well, it started with my own journey. I was at the point in my life when I had 2 young kids and actively working within my internal medicine practice. That's what people kept telling me. It was the reason that I was exhausted. You're a new mommy. You just need more sleep. But I got more sleep. I made it very intentional to get 8 hours of sleep and to check my sleep quality and the quantity, and none of that changed anything. And so, in that moment, I started to do like most people. I started looking for other answers. Initially looking at lab work, trying to find out, is my thyroid messed up? Is my, are my adrenals having dysfunction? All of my labs came back perfectly normal. And so my background's in biochemistry. So whenever something is complicated, my thought process is always, how can we break this down into the smallest active unit and study that? And so that's kind of where the thought came. Maybe rest isn't just this big one global thing. Maybe like in biochemistry, it has a smaller unit, and I can focus more in on those smaller units.
Was there anything in particular that surprised you the most in that process? What was the most surprising piece of that?
I think the most surprising part for me was initially it was way more than 7. I started just writing down I started initially looking at energy expenditure. My thought process was, if I'm tired or fatigued or drained in an area, then energy had to be released from me in some way to get to a place of depletion. Because I wasn't starting out in depletion every single day. I would come into some days, feel completely mentally clear. And then by the end of the day, I'm like scatterbrained. And then other days I would start physically feeling great. And by midday, my energy was drained. My physical energy was drained. So I started looking at where is energy being used in my day? And I think that was probably the most surprising. The many ways I was using energy and was discounting them, had not really thought about the emotional energy that's used in, let's say, the ICU or the ER when I'm managing patients, or even the creative energy that's used when I'm coming up with a diagnosis after someone's given me 20 different complaints that they're feeling. So I wasn't thinking about energy like that. I was just thinking of, why am I so tired? but I wasn't looking at what was leading to some of the exhaustion. And so that initial list was way more than seven. But what I noticed were some of the things, many of the things overlapped. Like all of these things fell over into the physical category, and a big, group of these things fell over into mental. And so that's where the seven came from. It was grouping all of the different energy expenditures into buckets, so to speak, so that I could simplify the process for myself.
Interesting. That makes sense. I don't think I've gotten to that part about more than one thing depleting you physically. I can't wait to get to that part, because it seems like if something is depleting you physically, that means you need sleep to me.
Yeah, that's common. That's common what people think, but that also takes into kind of lends itself into the thought process that all rest is cessation. And so if I'm tired, I just need to stop the activity. But stopping isn't necessarily restorative in every situation. Sometimes the restoration comes in doing something that actually pours back into the recovery phase, because rest, really at the core of rest, is recovery. It's pouring back in where things have become depleted or out of alignment or in some way less functional. So, in the form of physical rest, one of the things I found for myself was, like I said, I had small kids. So, I was lifting small kids all day long. And then on top of that, computers were a big part of, or are still a big part of healthcare. So I was lugging around my iPad that we were using back in the day for electronic medical records, and they were not tiny. These were big, kind of laptop size iPad type situations. So carrying them in awkward positions for multiple hours throughout the day through the hospital, I wasn't taking into account the fact that some of that neck and shoulder ache and some of that back pain was from a physical rest deficit, simply because of body ergonomics. Sleep can help some with that, but what actually helped me more with that was doing like stretching and doing neck rolls and getting massages and doing some activities that improve the circulation, the lymphatics, the muscle flexibility, and all of those kind of things.
That's so interesting. That part of the book really popped out at me too, because I remember you mentioned athletes wouldn't dream of like not stretching before or after they're running or whatever it is they're doing. And yet we're picking up these toddlers. I remember when I first had my son, when he was a newborn, my arms were so sore, and he was just a newborn, right? And then a few years later, I was carrying him around like it was nothing. And that's a workout to
all
build
30 pounds of him probably. And
yeah.
you're like, hey, this is just the life of being a mom. But
Yeah.
if you went to the gym and you lifted 30 pounds 8 times, we call that a set. And
that's right. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of our audience are moms, and they like to live a natural, healthy lifestyle. A lot of times they're really trying hard to take care of their families and make good wellness decisions, but they still feel exhausted. What do you find with most women who are moms who are feeling depleted, even though they are doing all the right things? Like they're getting enough sleep, they're working out, they're eating right, and they're still feeling depleted. What's the most common thing that you find?
usually it's one of the types of rest they've never thought about. For example, with a lot of moms, it could be creative rest, especially if they're a mom who has kids of various ages. So you may have a 2-year-old who's kind of right beside you 24 hours a day. And then you may also have a, 8-year-old who's in soccer or who's in, ballet or whatever it is. And so you're juggling all of these different these schedules. You're having to be creative because one's a picky eater and the other, rest of the family will eat anything. So I find that moms have to be extremely creative, but they don't see themselves as creatives. They're problem solving, and problem solving in itself by nature is a creative process. So they could have a creative rest deficit where they don't feel motivated even anymore, or they don't feel inspired as a mom. They have settled into the drudgery of motherhood rather than being able to continue to experience the joy of it. And so I find that that's one. And then another that I find is that sometimes moms can have quite a bit of emotional rest deficit simply because they are kind of the emotional thermostats, for lack of a better word, of their homes. And so, kids are screaming, husband may be, stressed by whatever they're doing and whatever they have going on in their life. And they're kind of the peacekeepers. They keep everything kind of in check, which then creates an atmosphere sometimes where they don't have a place to get emotional rest. They're everyone else's emotional rest advocates. Somebody falls over, they fix the boo boo. Somebody gets mad, they're the shoulder to, vent with. But then where do they go? And so they tend to be stuffers and they kind of hold on to all the emotions and never feel like they have a place to release it. So those are two that I find quite frequently popping up with women in general and particularly with mothers.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's something that causes a lot of women to start questioning or doubting themselves. It's like, what am I doing wrong? It's a huge mental shift to think that rest might be active, for one thing. How can someone tell whether what they're experiencing is actually a rest deficit as opposed to a lack of discipline or some other missing piece of just like strictly wellness?
Yeah, well, for the wellness piece, I think everyone, if you are tired and you have not had some type of general physical at some point to evaluate it, I think that's always a starting place. I find I'm an internist, so my background obviously is medicine, and I find that quite a few women are B12 deficient, vitamin D deficient, magnesium dysfunctions within their body. A lot of women can't methylate B12. There's a lot of medical, like sound medical reasons why people can be fatigued as well. So I think we have to make sure we're kind of starting on an even playing field, that any underlying health issues have been at least evaluated, especially now that you can, in some areas, depending on where people live, you can order labs without even having a doctor. Now, with some insurances is even covered like that. So I think we need to start with that, make sure there's no underlying medical issues. But then when you have no underlying medical issues and you are getting sleep, because sleep is important. You are getting 6, 7, 8 hours of time in the bed where you feel like you are soundly asleep, but you're still waking up exhausted. That's when I usually start asking people, what else could it be? And so if it's something related to like your own willpower, let's say, for lack of a better word, willpower is really oftentimes attached to inspiration and motivation. And so willpower just doesn't pop up out of nowhere. So we then have to determine what is the reason you even want to be feeling better or more energy or stronger or happier or whatever it is where you're needing additional rest at. Because if there's a feeling of guilt, every time you rest, you're not going to rest. If there's a feeling of rest is less important than the work, you're not going to rest. If there's a feeling that I have to do more to earn my ability to rest, that's non-productive. So we kind of have to go back to some of the core mindset things around what we believe about rest and the prioritization of rest in our lives.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's so hard because I know that you're a Christian. I'm Christian as well. And so a lot of times the first thing I do if I'm experiencing any sort of issue is I pray. And one of the things I pray about a lot is my business. So I was praying, asking for guidance on that and what should I focus on? Is there anything I need to do? And the answer I kept getting, which was so confusing to me, was about the Sabbath. It was about resting. And I was like, resting? No, I'm asking what to do about my business. And so I was so confused. And for weeks, of course, I immediately started implementing it, even though I didn't understand it. But it's like over the weeks and months, I started to understand the power and importance of it. And I love how you called it sacred rest, because rest really is sacred. And one thing I've discovered is it helps me live my life, and including doing the business, on a more deep, meaningful, profound level, because I'm grounded. I have time to reflect and really think about what's important, how I can help people and things like that. And a lot of times when we're running in the rat race, we're kind of just spinning our wheels and we live our lives on the surface.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, that was the reason after Sacred Rest, the book that I wrote following that is called Being Fully Known, The
Hmm.
Joyful Satisfaction of Beholding, Becoming, and Belonging. And that specifically was based on the work that I do coaching women who are business owners or entrepreneurs or coaches, because I was seeing that kind of as a repetitive pattern. And one of the things that I teach them within the book is this concept of abiding before acting, because I find too often we come up with a great idea and then we're just kind of off to the races. However, the positioning of the heart that allows, and this is a faith-based book specifically versus Sacred Rest that brings in, a lot of the science. The positioning of the heart from a Christian perspective is that seek ye first the kingdom. And so the abiding is actually this requires us to enter into Sabbath, not just as a weekend practice that we do one day out of seven, but a lifestyle of living Sabbath, where we're continuously returning to the place of connection to the vine and the fruit coming not from our own energy, but from the source, the ultimate source of all life and all things. So I love that because I feel like that's kind of the next level of spiritual rest. Spiritual rest, in Sacred Rest, I talk about holistically as it relates to anyone, whether they are of the same faith as we are or someone who completely doesn't even believe there is a God, can understand the benefit of spiritual rest because we all have spirit. And so that's still an aspect of this, the human nature that we all have can be depleted. But when it has a faith basis to it, it then does create more opportunities to walk into rest in every area of your life and include the spirit in that as well.
Yes, yes, that's so beautiful. I've noticed that as I've started to incorporate that practice into my life, I try to take one day off a week. I had no idea how hard that was going to be, how much discipline it can take. I try to leave my phone completely off for 24 hours once a week at least, and also not work. And it's just, I didn't even know. I feel like I was addicted to work. And as I've been practicing that, I've noticed that I'm able to rest better for small moments throughout the day and throughout the week because I've learned how to do it. I've been practicing it.
And that's the thing. You mentioned discipline. Really, it's habits. You know, I think it's Atomic Habits that talks about when you do something repetitively, it becomes a habit. You don't require discipline anymore. It just becomes a part of how you function, how you live. And so, yes, in the very beginning, most of us have taught ourselves to ignore our body's, mind, and spirit's need for rest. We've taught, we're in a culture that teaches us just do it, get it done, grind it out, keep going. You can do it. That's kind of the mentality. No one's saying you can rest. It's kind of the opposite. And so we've taught ourselves that rest is not as important and we don't have to have it. It's a bonus if you happen to get it, but that's
Right.
definitely not biblical and it's not functional for the reality of how human beings are actually made and put together. We are made to have to require restoration and periods of renewal and recovery. If we even get to like the scientific level, our bodies have two nervous system functions going at the same time. You have the sympathetic, the kind of fight, flight, get work done part of you, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest and recovery. Our bodies are designed to live in the parasympathetic. And then when the lion or the bear, or we need to go chase down dinner, we spike up our sympathetic and go get the job done. And we come back to our rest and recovery so that we stay in a place of ready to go. That is not how we live now. We actually live the complete opposite. We live in the sympathetic. Every time our notifications go off on our phone, sensory overload. Every time, an emergency happens in our home, we stay in this sympathetic state. And now the fight is, how do we teach our bodies to return to the parasympathetic? Because it's learned to live in the fight and flight stress reaction mode.
Yeah, it's like everything is inverted in this world, including that. And when you said restoration just now, I realized the first part of that is rest. And
Mm-hmm.
that must be where that word comes from, is restoration, right?
That's I always when I write this within anything that we do, I always type the REST bold and the rest of the restoration smaller,
Yeah.
just to help people identify that rest is at the core of restoration. It's what actually is required for us to feel like we've improved in any way.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that just it's I love how it's shifting my perspective on what rest is. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to give the audience just a little taste of a couple of the different types of rest in a little bit more detail. You mentioned that a lot of the women in our audience, the top types of rest that they might be lacking in are creative and emotional. Can you give us just a little taste of how you would replenish yourself creatively or emotionally?
Yeah, so creative rest is looking at the things that inspire you. And so research shows that a lot of people are inspired around nature. So that could include going for a walk where you're out kind of appreciating nature. That could be something as simple as changing the lock screens on your phone and your computer so that the things that pop up inspire you. It could be a nature scene, it could be a picture of something from an art gallery, it could be a piece of artwork you have in your home. It could be something your child drew that you're just like, oh, this makes my heart happy, to be able to look at this. It could be an accent wall in your home that reminds you of, let's say, if your thing are oceans, maybe you have a nautical theme in one area of your office that reminds you of that. So you get to kind of choose what those things are. It could be having flowers on your kitchen table if that brings it to mind, but it's basically bringing the things into your environment that inspire you and recognizing that spending time in appreciation of beauty, whether that's when you're traveling or whether that's when you're just out and about, that unlocks creativity inside of you. Creativity has to come from somewhere. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from inspiration. And so if you're not allowing yourself to be regularly inspired, look for ways to bring play into your own life and discovery and kind of inquiry so that you begin to open up that part of yourself again. And then from emotional rest, it's interesting because creative and emotional rest both can have beauty, so to speak, as an aspect of it. Creative rest is listening to music, could be a part of it, right? You listen to music, you get inspired. Emotional rest might be playing music because for some people, like my youngest son, he plays the guitar. So if he's processing some emotion, he might strum something and sing something on his guitar that helps him process through whatever that emotion is. Other people may process their emotions with a counselor or a trusted friend. Someone else might process it through like journaling. So, there's different ways, but emotional rest really at the heart of it is how am I taking what it is I feel on the inside of me, giving it room to be evaluated without judged, and then having opportunity to process through what that emotion is meaning to me. Because oftentimes what we do is not emotional rest. We do kind of more emotional trauma dumping. We go tell our best friend, this person said this and this person said that, and I can't believe they did this or did that. That's trauma dumping. You're basically just sharing the event. It's like you're painting the Netflix picture, right? And they can jump into the scene with you and see and hear all the things that happen. Emotional rest goes so much deeper than that. It has a greater level of vulnerability and it requires more trust. So the flip side of that would not be me telling everything that happened in the conversation. Emotional rest would look more like saying, when that person said this, it made me feel unseen. It made me feel small. It hurt my feelings and made me feel like they didn't appreciate me. That's a whole different conversation because now we've shifted from what happened out externally, so to speak, to what it did in my heart, what it did to my personal emotions so that I can now begin to process it.
Wow. There's so much there that is just like I said, it's opened up a whole new world to me about rest. So thank you for giving us a little taste about that. if there was one thing that you would give our audience to take away from this conversation to start with, what would that be?
And these are moms, is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically moms. Well, the one thing would be is to give your children what you did not have. We grew up in we are growing up. Most of us grew up in a culture that taught us that rest should almost be shameful. Like we should work was so much more important than rest. And it's left most of us where we are now because of what we've heard. Now that generation is looking back, trying to figure out how to reclaim the rest that they have not had for the past 50 years. We can actually position our children to not have to experience that. So we say, I don't have time to rest because I have kids. That is the reason to rest. Show them what it looks like to live a life that is not burned out. Show them what it means to bring rest into your regular routine day. You don't have to take a sabbatical or even take a dedicated Sabbath day. I love that. But start where you are. It might be as simple as sitting down at the dinner table and saying, hey, from this moment forward, we're not doing phones at the dinner table. We're going to have conversation and make the dinner table a place for social rest, where you actually have a chance to speak life into each other, say positive things about each other, affirm each other. And so we can shift the culture really one dinner table at a time, just starting small.
Yes, I love that. And so again, definitely read Dr. Saundra's book, Sacred Rest. Recover your life, renew your energy, restore your sanity. I highly recommend it. It's life-changing. If you want to live a more naturally healthy lifestyle, this is a good one to have in your library. And what is the name again of your newest book? And tell us a little bit about what that's about.
Yes, that book is titled Being Fully Known, and it's written in the form of a 21-day guide. So it's 21 chapters to walk you through the process of identifying how to get better emotional, spiritual, and social rest as it relates to your career and your calling.
I love that. I just listened to one of your interviews about that book this morning, and I'm looking forward to getting that as well because it was so inspiring. I love how you dive deeper into the spiritual aspect too. I heard you even mention taking Jesus' life as an example of how
Absolutely.
to stay rested. I just love that. So where can people find you and continue learning?
Yeah, so main website is ichoosemybestlife.com. That's where you can learn about all the different books and resources. And I highly recommend that they visit restquiz.com because they can take our free rest deficit assessment. It'll give them a score in all 7 areas so that they're able to determine which areas they need to begin with first.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Saundra, for sharing your insight and wisdom with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Definitely go take Dr. Saundra's rest quiz. I'll link it below.
This show is made possible through my work with doTERRA. If you're curious about simple, natural ways to care for your health and it's yours, or even exploring the possibility of building your own wellness business, check out my website at newviewessentials.com. You'll find a link in the show notes to learn more. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk next time on New View, New Life.
The sky turns gold where the mountains sleep. A whisper of truth in the wind so deep. Every step feels like a brand new start. New horizons call my name. Nothing stays the same. Change the view, change the game. The river knows where it needs to flow. life's a path.